Imagine you're stepping into an arena. You're completely geared up, your adrenaline is pumping, and you are just ready for this high-speed, high-impact collision.
Right, you're totally braced for a fight.
Exactly. You're fully expecting your opponent to charge at you, to try and overpower you with everything they've got,
Yeah.
but instead they just stand there.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
Right. They don't shout, they don't rush, they don't try to match your aggression at all.
It's profoundly unsettling because when you're braced for an impact that never actually comes, your own momentum becomes your biggest enemy. You start, like, second-guessing your own energy.
And as the match goes on, they just patiently absorb your attacks, they shift, they redirect, they wait. And slowly, agonizingly, you realize that while you were frantically trying to win by forcing the issue...
And we're just outlasting your certainty.
Yes, until you realize you've already lost. Welcome to the deep dive. Today our mission is to explore a document that completely upends how we usually think about strength. It's titled Bannock's Pokémon
It is a genuinely fascinating read. I mean, what we have here isn't just a tactical battle manual, though it certainly functions as one.
Oh, definitely.
It's also this deeply personal character study and really a masterclass in leadership. All of it is centered around a trainer named Bannock MacBain, who holds the title of the Starlight Keeper of Olivine.
Right, and if you've ever wanted a shortcut to understanding how to command a room or an office or a battlefield without ever raising your voice, this document is the blueprint. It's basically about the mastery of inevitability.
I love that phrase, the mastery of inevitability.
Yeah, but I was looking through the early chapters of these notes, and I have to admit, I was completely surprised by this massive contradiction right at the start.
Oh, about his first Pokémon.
Yeah, Bannock is famously known as a master of flying-type Pokémon, right? But the notes say his very first partner wasn't a bird at all, it was a Charmander.
That is such a crucial detail because it establishes his entire psychological baseline. Like, to understand that contradiction, you really have to look at the environment he was raised in.
Olivine City, right?
Exactly. Olivine is a coastal town, and the notes describe it as very atmospheric. The whole rhythm of life there is dictated by the push and pull of the tides and the steady, sweeping glow of the city's massive lighthouse.
So it's not exactly a quiet, gentle breeze we're talking about here. It's harsh coastal winds.
Yeah, very harsh. And as a kid, Bannock wasn't drawn to the bustling, noisy crowds at the port or the loud Pokémon battles happening in the streets.
He kind of avoided all that noise.
He did. Instead, he would climb the steps of the lighthouse every single evening. Not to escape the world, but to observe it from a distance. He'd watch the ocean, the ships, and specifically the flying-type Pokémon tracing these quiet, intricate patterns across the sky.
Wow.
He was basically internalizing a very specific idea, which is true influence isn't about immediate localized dominance. It's about maintaining a vantage point and having the endurance to hold it.
Which brings us back to that Charmander, because the way they met is so telling. According to the document, a traveling trainer had just abandoned this Charmander at the port.
Which is incredibly dangerous for a Charmander.
Exactly. For anyone who doesn't know, Charmander is a fire-type reptile with a literal flame burning on the tip of its tail. If that flame goes out, it dies.
Right.
And it's just sitting there in the freezing, harsh coastal winds of Olivine. Its flame flickering, really struggling to stay lit. People are just walking by. But Bannock stops.
And notice what he doesn't do here. He doesn't throw a Pokeball. He doesn't bark a command at it.
Yeah, he doesn't try to own it.
Right. In a world where trainers are basically taught to catch, command, and conquer, he takes a completely different approach.
He just sits down next to it. He physically places his own body between the Charmander and the coastal wind to protect its flame.
Yeah.
And then he just waits. He listens. He sits there under the glow of the lighthouse until the Charmander stabilizes, and ultimately it chooses him.
It's a beautiful moment.
It really is. The document distills this into a brilliant insight. It says, you don't earn loyalty through strength, you earn it through presence.
And because he understood how to shield that Charmander, he realized that true control meant understanding the environment first, not just forcing your will upon it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for anyone listening to this right now, just think about modern management or leadership in your own career.
Oh, absolutely.
The absolute best leaders aren't the ones barking orders with a megaphone when a crisis hits. They're the ones acting like a windbreak. They shield their team's, their focus, their morale when the corporate environment gets rough. They give them the space to stabilize and do their best work.
That is a perfect parallel. And that realization that you have to understand the nature of the creature or the person you're working with before you can ever hope to guide them, that's what drives him back to studying the birds.
Right, because he goes down to the docks.
Yeah, he starts watching how wingles react to the atmospheric pressure right before a storm hits. He observes how pidgeys nest in the lighthouse beams to avoid the drafts.
So he's really studying the ecosystem.
Exactly. And the locals actually start calling him a bird keeper. Not because he captures a ton of birds, but because he understands how they move with the wind, rather than trying to control it.
Okay, but how does a guy who just quietly sits and watches birds become an elite ace trainer in the competitive circuit?
Wow.
Because the notes show that when he first stepped into the arena, he got beat a lot. Like traveling trainers would pass through and just roll right over him.
They did. Because his team lacked raw, explosive power, and he just flat out refused to adopt the hyper-offensive tactics that were popular at the time.
He was stubborn about his philosophy.
He was still trying to figure out how to translate his philosophy of presence into a competitive mathematical strategy.
But wait, I had to push back on this mechanically. The document says his turning point was when he, quote, stopped trying to win quickly. He started pacing battles and letting opponents beat themselves. But in a high-stakes, highly competitive environment, if you just slow down and let the other guy take the initiative, don't you just get steamrolled by someone stronger?
It seems counterintuitive, I know. But what's fascinating here is that we need to define a concept called tempo.
Tempo.
Yeah. In any competitive environment, whether that's sports, business negotiations, or a Pokémon battle, whoever dictates the speed of the interaction usually dictates the outcome.
Okay, unpack that for me. How does slowing down dictate the outcome?
Well, when you're in a high-stakes environment, the natural human instinct is to rush, right? To force a quick resolution just to alleviate the anxiety of the conflict.
Oh, sure. You just want it over with.
Exactly. Bannock realized that his opponents were desperate for a fast win, so he starved them of it.
Wow.
By moving slower, by making highly intentional defensive switches, he created psychological friction. He wasn't giving them a clear target to hit. His opponents would get impatient, they'd start over-predicting his moves, overextend their own resources, and ultimately they'd collapse. He took away their tempo.
It's like dragging someone who wants to sprint into a marathon. They just burn out in the first mile. And you can see how he built this mindset by looking at the specific Pokémon he added to his team later on. It wasn't just a collection of monsters, it was like a curriculum. Take Starmie, for instance.
Oh, Skarmory, a giant bird covered entirely in steel armor.
Right. The notes say Skarmory was highly territorial and completely unyielding. Bannock couldn't outmuscle a giant steel bird, so he had to learn to respect its space. It taught him the concept of boundaries.
Which is huge.
For anyone listening who struggles with burnout, that is a massive takeaway. Sometimes true leadership means holding your boundary and explicitly choosing not to engage with every single problem that flies at you.
Absolutely. And then his journey takes him to these ancient ruins where he encounters Claydol.
The floating clay statue thing?
Yeah, it's a ground and psychic type. It is completely different from the coastal birds he grew up with. But Claydol navigates through levitation. It taught him that flying isn't just about physical height, it's about perspective.
Oh, I like that.
It's about pattern recognition, seeing the entire board and thinking 10 moves ahead instead of just reacting to what's right in front of your face.
And my personal favorite on his team, Gliscor.
Yes.
It's this bat-like scorpion creature that literally thrives on being poisoned. The document details how it uses an item called a toxic orb to intentionally poison itself, which triggers an ability that actually heals it instead of hurting it.
It's such a wild mechanic.
It really is. Gliscor taught him adaptation, that you don't need perfect sunny conditions to succeed. You can find comfort and even thrive in deeply imperfect, high-pressure situations.
Which perfectly prepares him for the ultimate test of this whole philosophy. We move from his internal mastery to a massive external crisis.
Right.
A violent storm hits Olivine City. It's absolute chaos.
The document paints a really vivid picture here. Everyone in the city is taking shelter, retreating from the wind and the rain. But Bannock doesn't hide. He goes to the very top of the lighthouse. He stands out in the storm, not trying to fight the weather, because obviously you can't punch a hurricane, but simply maintaining the lighthouse's beam to guide the ships caught out at sea. He becomes the literal embodiment of his childhood lesson saying, when others can't.
And it's this exact moment of unshakable presence that attracts the legendary Pokémon Lugia, the guardian of the seas.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, but I also have to challenge this part, because it sounds almost mythological.
Okay, go for it.
A violent storm hits, a guy is standing on a lighthouse, and a literal legendary deity of the ocean just shows up.
Hmm.
Is this a literal historical event in the notes, or is this just like local myth building to make him sound cooler?
It totally reads like myth, I agree. But in the context of this world, it functions as a literal validation of his growth. The document is very clear that this wasn't a battle.
So he didn't fight it.
No, Bannock doesn't throw a master ball and capture Lugia to use as a weapon. Lugia isn't a trophy here. Lugia appears because it recognizes a kindred spirit. The notes describe it as a mutual recognition of calm in chaos and presence without noise.
Wow. It's like a force of nature recognizing an equal force of stillness.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this storm encounter is the crucible that really forges his final identity. Think about it. He has retained the deep individual empathy of the bird keeper who shielded the Charmander. He has mastered the high-level tempo-controlling strategy of the ace trainer who starves his opponents of quick victories. And now Lugia's arrival acts as a legendary cosigner on his capacity to be a true guardian.
And that synthesis of identities is exactly why the people of Olivine formally ask him to become their gym leader.
Yes.
And he accepts. But he doesn't take it as a promotion or an ego boost. He views it as a heavy responsibility. He summarizes his entire outlook with this quote, which gives him his title: "Anyone can lead when the sun is shining, but if you can guide others under starlight, then you're ready."
The Starlight leadership. It's beautiful in theory, but what makes Bannock's notes so uniquely valuable is that this isn't just poetry.
Right, there's actual math behind it.
Exactly. He actually translates this exact philosophy into a highly disciplined mechanical reality on the battlefield. We really need to look at how he weaponizes this patience.
So what does this all mean when the Pokeballs actually open? Let's look at the actual architecture of his team. The document breaks his team down into what it calls a crew, and the core engine is built on balance control and tempo orchestration.
Right. The entire win condition isn't to knock the opponent out immediately. It's to force the opponent into making bad decisions over a long period of time. He outlines a very precise four-step battle flow.
Step 1 is establishing the tempo. And he does this in a way that feels a little backwards. He doesn't lead with his heavy defensive walls. He leads with Swellow, a bird he calls the Scout.
Right, and here's where the mechanics get brilliant. Swellow holds an item called a flame orb, which intentionally burns it.
Wait, why would you burn your own bird?
Because Swellow has an ability called Guts, which doubles its attack power when it has a status condition. So Swellow comes out, gets burned, hits incredibly hard and fast, and then uses a move called U-turn to immediately pivot back out to safety.
So he punches them in the mouth right out of the gate, forcing them to react.
Yeah.
And while they are reacting, he brings in Cladle, the compass, to set up Stealth Rock. For those who aren't familiar, what exactly does Stealth Rock do to an opponent?
It's an entry hazard. It basically scatters sharp, levitating rocks all over the opponent's side of the field. From that point on, every single time the opponent switches a new Pokémon into the battle, they take unavoidable damage. It turns the very act of maneuvering into a penalty.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Which sets up step 2, controlling the game. This is where that agonizing psychological friction we talked about earlier really happens.
Yeah.
Once the rocks are up, he brings out Skarmory, the shield, and Gliscor, the tactician.
And this is where the opponent's spirit breaks. Skarmory is holding an item called a Rocky Helmet. If the opponent gets frustrated and tries to use a physical attack on Skarmory, the helmet damages them in return.
So they literally get punished for attacking.
They get punished for playing the game.
It sounds like a Chinese finger trap.
Yeah.
The harder and faster the opponent struggles to break free and land a hit, the tighter Bannock's control gets. Because if they attack Skarmory, they take damage from the helmet. If they realize they can't break Skarmory and try to switch to a different Pokemon to get a better matchup, boom, they take damage from the Stealth Rock.
Exactly. It's a complete attrition trap. And while they are bleeding out from rocks and helmets, Gliscor is sitting behind a defensive substitute, constantly healing itself with its toxic orb and throwing out toxic poison to slowly drain the opponent's health even further.
Jeez.
The act of fighting back is literally what kills them.
It forces them into a psychological corner where they feel they have to make a desperate, risky move. And whenever the chaos gets too high or the opponent manages to set up a dangerous threat, we hit step 3, stabilize. Cladle comes back in to rapidly spin away any traps the opponent tried to set, and Lugia, the Guardian, steps in.
And Lugia's mechanics perfectly mirror Bannock's philosophy of absorbing pressure. Lugia has an ability called multi-scale, which cuts the damage of any attack in half if Lugia is at full health.
Half damage, that's insane.
Combined with its ability to reliably heal itself, Lugia can simply absorb an opponent's ultimate desperate attack, brush it off, and completely reset the board to a neutral, safe position. All that hard work the opponent did just erase.
For his opponents, this sounds absolutely agonizing.
Oh, it has to be.
And finally, step 4, execute. Once the opponent is totally worn down, poisoned, chipped away by rocks and helmets, and mentally exhausted from trying to break this immovable shield, an opening is created. They leave themselves exposed. That's when his very first partner, that Charmander, who is now a fully grown Charizard, comes in as the commander. It uses Dragon Dance to boost its speed and power, and just cleanly sweeps whatever's left of the opposing team.
Every single Pokemon plays a role that represents an earned life lesson. Swellow is trust. Charizard is responsibility. Skarmory is boundaries. Claydol is perspective. Gliscor is adaptation. And Lugia is balance.
The document describes the feeling of fighting this team perfectly. It says it's not aggressive and it's not passive. It's inevitable.
Inevitable.
Opponents feel rushed in the early game when Swellow attacks. They feel completely stuck in the mid-game against Skarmory and Gliscor, and they are totally overwhelmed by the late game when Charizard cleans up. But surely this isn't flawless. I mean, does he have any blind spots? Is there any way to actually break this architecture of inevitability?
The notes are remarkably objective about his own vulnerabilities, actually. He explicitly states that his Achilles heel is fast hyper-offense.
Meaning someone who doesn't care about the trap and just starts swinging?
Yes. If an opponent comes out with overwhelming, immediate force before Bannock has a chance to establish his tempo, particularly if they use strong electric or ice-type attacks that threaten his flying types, it can disrupt his entire flow.
So the whole system breaks down.
Right, because his strategy is a complex machine. It requires absolutely flawless switching decisions to maintain that Chinese finger trap. If he makes one wrong pivot early on, that suffocating control shatters. He needs the time to set the board. If you deny him that time, the system struggles to boot up.
That is such a crucial caveat. He needs time to establish the tempo, and hyper-offense denies him that time. Which honestly brings us right back to you, listening to this deep dive.
It does, because Bannock's entire journey and even his mechanical vulnerabilities mirror how we interact with the pressures in our own lives.
Exactly. I want you to reflect on your own approach to challenges right now. Where in your life are you currently trying to overpower a situation through sheer force? Where are you exhausting yourself swinging wildly at the wind when instead you should be taking Claydol's lesson, getting some perspective, understanding the environment, and choosing carefully when to actually engage?
It's so easy to just keep swinging.
It is. But Bannock's ultimate lesson is that true strength isn't about raw power or making the most noise. It's about becoming steady enough that others can actually rely on you when the storm hits.
And that ties perfectly into the weakness we just discussed. Bannock's vulnerability is fast, hyper-offense. And let's be honest, in our own lives, we're constantly surrounded by a world of hyper-offense.
Right, completely.
A frantic workplace, a relentless stream of notifications, information overload, a culture that constantly demands instant aggressive results.
Yes. So the provocative question we want to leave you with today is this. In a world that is constantly rushing you, a world that is always trying to force you into a hyper-offensive panic to meet its demands, how do you defend your right to move at a slow, intentional tempo? How do you maintain your presence when everything else is demanding your power?
It's a question worth sitting with, just like sitting in the cold coastal wind, taking the time to protect a flickering flame.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Starlight Keeper's notes. Until next time, remember, you don't have to brace for the collision if you learn how to outlast it. Keep your tempo, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.